Good evening and welcome to the Method Test Prep webinar. My name is Oliver Luisi. Looking forward to sharing a lot of hopefully helpful insights and information about the SAT and ACT, how to get started thinking about these exams, how to prep effectively for them, and to show you a bit of the resources and tools that are available out there for you to utilize. I just want to point out a few things. The webinar is being recorded, so all of you that have registered will get a link at the end that you can watch this later on at your own time if you want to review anything. In addition, I've posted 5 files or handouts that you can download at any time during the webinar or afterwards. The first will be the actual file for this PowerPoint presentation so you can follow along. In addition, a couple flyers about some of the services we offer for tutoring, classes, our web program, some of which I'll go into through the duration of the presentation tonight. In addition, I will put up occasionally a poll, just some simple questions to get an idea of who our audience is and what the makeup of the group is. There's also the ability to chat in any questions you have at the bottom. I'll do my best to try and respond to those as I go throughout. And without further ado, let's jump in. I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about our company. Method Test Prep is a New York-based company that was founded about 20 years ago. Our founder, Tom Millers, is a graduate of Princeton University. He was a public school teacher for a bit before he started tutoring and found it so rewarding and such a great use of his time and loved the connection individually with students that he really jumped in full time and built up a great network of families and eventually schools that were working with Method. We've developed quite a robust network, not only in New York here, where we're initially based, but really across the country through our web-based program and our online teaching and tutoring. We're focused primarily on SAT and ACT prep for high school students. We also do countless hours of subject tutoring as well. We do educational consulting for schools. We work with independent college counselors as well as guidance counselors across the country, educating everyone on these exams, what's happening with them, what's changing with them, insights that can be really helpful for students, parents, teachers, and counselors as well. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Oliver Luisi. I am the director of tutoring here at Method Test Prep. I'm originally from New York, Long Island myself. I attended private school here. I'm a graduate of Harvard University. I've worked in education now for over 20 years myself at all the various levels, primary school, secondary school, and university level as well. I really enjoy my role here. I have a lot of different hats I wear. I do oversee primarily our tutoring team, our team of teachers and instructors. In addition, I work with a number of schools, building school relationships and helping to connect with schools locally and across the country. I work on developing materials for our company, and I've worked with countless students, and really it's very rewarding when you see the light bulb turn on, you see students understand concepts and start to really feel that they're gaining confidence in preparation for these exams, and with a lot of knowledge that they really are going to use beyond these exams into college and even further. My contact information I'll put up at the end. You can certainly reach out to me individually with any questions. Afterwards, happy to set up a free consult. We talk with many parents every day and students to give them some guidance as to where they're starting out and thinking about this journey of test prep. All right. So this evening I want to talk about a few really important things. First, I wanted to start off by just diving right into the SAT and ACT and looking at what these tests are about, what's on these exams, how do they compare, what's similar, what's different, how do they relate to your process of college applications and what colleges are thinking about in terms of these exams. I also want to talk a little bit about your own personal assessment and thinking about where you fit in with these tests and which test might be best for you, or if you're going to try both at some point, as well as creating a good test prep plan, a good general timeline for even sophomores and juniors and seniors. I'm going to talk a little bit also about some of the services and resources that we offer, including our web-based program, and I will share some more information on all those things, as well as answering any questions towards the end that you may have. All right, let's get started looking at the SAT and the ACT. I think one of the most important things to think about in preparing for these exams is to just begin by understanding what they are, what sort of things they're testing, what concepts and areas you're going to need to know, what sort of academic background will be helpful, where your strengths and weaknesses might play. And that's best served by jumping in and actually looking at the tests, literally looking at the questions if you're a student, and understanding what is going to be asked of you and starting to get a feel for what these tests are about. If I can share one important overview of these exams, if there's one thing you take away from the evening, it should be this. I want to dispel some of the myths out there that the SAT or the ACT are IQ tests, that they're the type of test where you just kind of show up, and if you're sharp or you're smart or you're lucky, you'll get the questions right and you'll get a good score. When I was in high school, I went to a very good academic school that prided itself on teaching us a lot of the things we need to know for college, and they assumed that, well, we taught you everything, you'll do fine on the SAT or ACT. They never really mentioned it, didn't talk too much about it. They just assumed you'd take it once, maybe at the end of junior year, and do well. That's not how you want to think about these tests. In fact, the thing to take away is that these tests, like any other subject in school, these tests are predictable. We know that because we spend countless hours studying these tests, understanding them better, and we recognize the patterns on these tests. And that's one of the key things that a student needs to start to understand and recognize, is that these tests can be anticipated. And if it's predictable, it means it warrants just a little bit of preparation. Let me give you a small example of what I mean by this. Of course, I wouldn't let you out of the webinar this evening without at least one SAT question. Here's an example sentence. The English department inspired their students to succeed beyond all expectations. Take a moment to look at this and think about what the error in this sentence may be. There is a grammatical error in this sentence, and what could it be? Well, as it turns out, even though the English department is made up of a lot of excellent teachers, it's in fact only one thing. So the pronoun that should replace it should not be their, which is plural. It should be its. And this is a singular pronoun. It's also a possessive pronoun, not it apostrophe s, which would be a contraction. It is. This seems like a pretty straightforward example, but this concept of pronoun antecedent, this makes up probably 7, 8 questions on the English section of both the SAT and the ACT. When you can anticipate you're going to see this, that's a bunch of points. You can think on the SAT of each question being about 10 points. So that's 70 points right there if you can get all these right. They're not that complicated, but knowing that they're going to be on the test allows you to prepare and study for this. I could have given you an example here of reading or math or science. There's examples across all the sections of the test, but I want to really emphasize here that there isn't a mystery to what's on these exams. It's very public. It's something you can find out more about. And the more preparation you do, the better you're going to be ready to succeed on these exams. Let's take a look at how these tests compare. If we look at the SAT and the ACT, a good place to start thinking about these exams is first, I really want to emphasize how similar these tests are. They always have been. about 85% of the content is really the same on both these tests. You can only ask questions about right triangle so many ways, subject-verb agreement. These are pretty basic things that are tested across both tests. And they are very, very similar. In fact, the SAT was completely redesigned about 2 years ago in an attempt to mimic or look more like the ACT in many ways. So they're more similar than they have ever been, and that's good news for students. Many students will try both tests or switch over to another test, and that transition is much smoother now because of the similarities between these exams. So you don't want to necessarily pigeonhole yourself or think, I'm only an SAT or only an ACT student. You want to take a look at these exams, see what's on them, and find out for yourself. Having said that, although they are very similar, there are some really important differences to note. And this could be a good place to start to think about where yourself or your student might have certain strengths or weaknesses that could play into which test might be best for them. The SAT tends to still be more of your typical standardized test. It's a little more abstract. There's a little more critical reading required throughout each section. The good news is that it gives you a little bit more time on each question in each section. So although it may be a little more analytical in parts, it's giving you the time to figure that out. Moving over to the ACT tends to be more of a straightforward test. It's a little bit more of a content test. It's more like a test you've seen at school where, do you know this? Well, here's the question, and if you know it, you'll get it right. There is definitely some analysis on the ACT, but in comparison to the SAT, it's a little more direct. The challenge on the ACT, however, is that it's very fast. These are both fast tests, but the ACT is especially fast. So whereas on the SAT, it requires maybe a little bit more deciphering, what is this question about? What are they really looking for? The ACT, one of the critical skills is efficiency. It's moving through questions and sections and passages in an efficient manner, knowing what's important, knowing what you can sort of skip over or skim over. And all those things come with practice and familiarity with the exams. If we look at the tests one-to-one, you can see they are fairly similar. Both tests have 4 sections of multiple choice and an optional essay. On the SAT, you start with reading, then you've got a writing and language section. It's essentially an English section. You don't have to write anything here. Then you've got 2 math sections, one without a calculator and one with a calculator. The SAT is scored out of 1600. The writing and the reading get combined into an 800 score, and both math sections get combined into an 800 score. Over on the ACT, you've got 4 sections as well. It starts off with English. You've got 1 math section. You get your calculator the whole time. You've got a reading section and a science section. A quick note about the ACT science section. This is a section that's much more similar to a reading section than, say, a math section. What I mean by that is with English and math, you need to remember a lot from school that you learned. On reading and science, yes, it can help, and certainly anything you know that pertains to the passage or the experiment you're reading about can help. But really, the reading and science sections are open book tests. They're giving you the passage, they're giving you an experiment or a study, and they're really just asking you to interpret the charts or data. So the ACT science can be a section that, if a student's a good reader, they can do really well on. They don't need to be an expert in science. The SAT does not have a science section, but it has plenty of science on it. In the reading section, they have science passages. In the math section, they have science type questions. So just be prepared for that. The ACT, those 4 sections are each scored out of 36, and it's averaged across the 4 for a composite score out of 36. On both of these exams, you're not going to be penalized for guessing, so you want to fill in every question you can. If you get it right, you're going to get points. If you get it wrong or leave it blank, you don't get anything. So you want to at least take a shot. There's no magic answer, but if you got 30 seconds left, just fill in the same answer for the last 5 questions or so. And at least you're giving yourself a chance to get a few of those right if you get lucky. Let's take a moment just to look at the individual sections of this test. I first want to start with English because this section is really almost identical in both tests. The English that's tested on the ACT and the SAT are almost identical in format and content. Very few differences, means that if you're just starting out with your prep, you're not really sure yet what test you're going to take, you can just start practicing your English and grammar rules. This is an area that'll show up on both tests and can be an easy area to pick up points with a little bit of refreshers on those basic grammar and rhetorical and structural English questions. The reading sections of these tests are very, very similar. You get a passage and you have some reading comprehension questions. Even the topics and the areas they cover are very similar. I would say the main difference is that the SAT passages tend to be slightly more complex, a little bit higher level reading. And one or two of the passages are historical, so they're even harder to decipher. They were written maybe 100 or 200 years ago. So it's a little more akin to sort of an honors or AP English or literature class in the content. The ACT is a little bit more geared at finding evidence quickly and understanding where to find context to answer questions. It's really the math where these tests diverge the most, or where they find the most difference in content. This is important because you want to pay attention to what level math you're at in school and what you're entering into junior year. So some sophomores at regular track math may be taking geometry and starting algebra 2 as a junior. Some juniors may be advanced and they've already completed algebra 2 as a sophomore. Maybe they're starting even pre-calculus as a junior. These tests are both supposed to cover about the same math high school curriculum. However, in reality, they have different emphases. On the ACT, the emphasis is towards earlier math. There's a real focus on geometry and algebra 1. There's some algebra 2, not a whole lot, and there's a little bit of trigonometry. On the SAT, that's reversed. There's only a little bit of geometry. There's a good amount of algebra, but the real focus on the SAT math is algebra 2. It's really a test of understanding the basic concepts of algebra 2, and those concepts are presented in a number of different ways. Both of these tests are supposed to be Common Core aligned. The SAT is even more explicitly Common Core aligned. The individuals and the groups who were responsible for redesigning the SAT a few years ago were very much the same individuals who developed the curriculum for the Common Core. So there's a lot of overlap there, and students who have had some experience with Common Core tend to find that the SAT math and even the SAT English has a lot of correlation to what they're doing in school. If you haven't taken Algebra 2 yet, obviously a good class, some self-study, a good tutor could show you what you need to know. You don't have to take the whole course, but it makes sense that the longer you spend in Algebra 2, the more time you have with that subject, the more the math on the SAT will make sense. A quick note about the essay. The essay portion of these exams is now completely optional. It's a separate section of the test. It'll be at the end of the test. It'll be another 40 or 50 minutes, and you're given a prompt and you have to quickly come up with an essay answer for that. These are graded on separate scales. They're not part of your general composite score for the multiple choice section. A dwindling number of schools are even requiring the essay at this point. I think as of this month, it's about 20 or 19. It's usually some of the more selective schools, but even a lot of Ivy League schools are not requiring it anymore. The real bottom line here is you may want to consider taking the essay because you don't yet know what schools you're applying to, and you don't know if the school you want to get into requires it. So it's one of those situations where it's better to be safe than sorry. Take the essay. It's good practice for college. If your school eventually does require it, you have that grade and you can share that. It would be tough to apply to a school and have to go back and retake this whole test just because you were missing the essay score. Again, it's not incorporated into the main score. It's a separate score. I wouldn't spend a huge amount of time of in your prep focusing on this, but you can get a lot of good examples of well-written essays and past prompts on the exams that can help prepare you. All right, I wanted to put up a quick poll before we move into the next portion about creating a test prep plan. And I was just curious, who is attending this webinar? Okay. I'm going to launch this and you can just answer the question here. If you're a student, a parent, a teacher, maybe a guidance counselor, a college advisor, just answer in here and we'll put up the results shortly. All right, thanks for chiming in on that. It looks like we've got mostly parents on, which makes sense. You're the ones that are kind of getting ahead of the curve and trying to find out about this test. Um, and also a few teachers as well. I think this information is really helpful for any one of those categories. There's a lot of good insights that hopefully I can share that you might get questions about that could be helpful. All right. The next thing I want to really look at is, now that we understand a little bit more about these tests, how do we create a good test prep plan? How do we sort of map out what this is going to look like, this journey of test prep for the SAT or the ACT? A couple things to consider as some of your initial steps. First, you're likely going to take some form of maybe a PSAT or even a pre-ACT at school. Many schools across the country offer a PSAT, a practice ACT, maybe sophomore year, but definitely junior year, usually in the fall. Although could be in the spring for certain schools or certain states. This is a great first step. This is a place where you're getting familiar with the exam and just getting an understanding of what's on it, and you're getting at least a diagnostic score. I do want to note that the PSAT and the pre-ACT are actually slightly shortened versions or abridged versions of the real test. So if you wanted a full-length real test, I would sit for a practice test. That could be something you do at a testing center, or we offer practice tests every weekend throughout the year. You could even do it through our web program at home, or grab a book at the library and time yourself and see how you do. In any case, after you've done a practice, this is giving you your baseline. It's giving you at least a snapshot into where you're starting out, what you may be good at, not so good at, and giving you a glimpse at the material on the exam. After that, I would sit with someone who knows what they're talking about and just review your results. That could be a teacher, a guidance counselor, a tutor, just to get an opinion or overview on, what the results may say about how you can succeed on this test, or what your strengths might be, or areas you need to work on. Eventually, when you do start to look at colleges and programs, you do want to understand what they're requiring for entrance for their freshman class, and that can sort of help set your goals or your expectations of where you want your score to be. Also, you definitely want to start looking at your calendar for the upcoming year. If you're starting a little prep as a sophomore or maybe junior year, you want to look first at your obligations and your commitments. When do you actually have time to study and prepare and take these exams? When does it make sense for you? I want to make a quick note about self-assessment. When you take those first diagnostic or practice exams, or hey, maybe you're a junior and you've just jumped in and taken your first official SAT or ACT, the scores themselves might not reveal the whole story. You can look at a concordance chart and it kind of lines up the SAT versus the ACT score. But as we indicated in the beginning, these tests are very similar. So it's not unusual that a student will often end up with a score that's about the same on both. That's not always the whole story. I always ask students, what did you think? What was your experience like? That can tell you a lot about the student and a lot about the test. They will reveal to you, hey, you know what? I didn't do great on either of these, but I liked the way the questions were asked on the SAT better, for instance. That already tells you a little bit about their learning style. They already have a little bit more confidence in that direction, and confidence is a big piece of these tests as well. So you've gotten a glimpse into maybe where the student is leaning towards, even if the scores didn't indicate that immediately. I do want to make a note also that if your student potentially has accommodations for extra time or testing accommodations in school, they can likely apply and get those same accommodations for the SAT or ACT. You do have to apply separately, but I would start looking into that process with your guidance department now, because this could be a big help on the test and an advantage in many ways. If we look at setting your timeline, and in the next slide I'll put up a sort of a generic or general timeline. I want to look at when the test dates are throughout the year. That should be, one of the first things to look at. Also think about your commitments. Are you a fall athlete? Are you in the spring play? Are you out of the country in December? Is there a big event or a wedding on one of the test dates that's going to prevent you from being there? All those things are important considerations. You want to look at, based on your calendar, what makes the most sense for you. You want to plan time to prep and study. You're probably going to take this test about 2 to 3 times. On average, most students do, maybe 4 times. You're rarely going to take it once and get the score you need. And you also don't want to end up taking it 8, 9 times. Statistically, it's been shown there's really burnout at a certain point and your scores won't really go up. So you want to aim and budget your year to take it, a few times, at least a couple makeups and retesting. You may do better on one section one time than another. Here's a pretty generic or general timeline for high school. Some students do take a PSAT or a pre-ACT in 10th grade as early as October. It is early. It might be before you see some of the material on the test, but it can give you an early indication of where you're at, and also what's on the test, what's on the exam. I do want to make a quick note about what's I list here as SAT 2 subject tests. The College Board, in addition to the SAT 1, also administers SAT 2 subject tests. These are subject-specific tests, like a biology test or a history test. It'll test you on a certain subject area. It's only an hour long. They're usually given on the same test dates as the SAT 1. Just to point out here that these are best taken right at the end of the course. So if you took biology sophomore year, you want to try and take these right after that. When it's all fresh in your mind, you take the final, and a week or so after that, you take the SAT 2 subject test. These tests are not required by every college. They're usually only required by the more top selective schools, like Ivy Leagues. I know Georgetown requires 3 subject tests. So you want to pay attention that if you're potentially even looking at those type of schools, you may need these subject tests. So you want to take them when it makes sense for you. In 11th grade, again in the fall, you will likely take a PSAT at school. Here, again, it's still just practice, but a note that the junior year PSAT is also a qualifying exam for what's called the National Merit Scholarship. Now, although it's very rare that you'll get the actual scholarship, only about 2% of the population in the country will get the scholarship. You have to write an essay and submit other materials. Many students who score high enough in their state will at least get recognition as a National Merit Scholar, which is a really great thing to put on your college application and your resume. It also obviously is a great practice for the real thing, a good dress rehearsal for maybe a fall test in October, November, December. We'll look at the full test dates in a moment. Then there's spring exams. Many students like taking the December ACT and the April ACT. Many juniors, if they're in AP classes, will be taking exams in May for their APs. So just keep that in mind as you start to plan out your year. You don't want to have to be pushing up against AP tests while you're preparing for the SAT and the ACT as well. In June, again, the SAT and ACT are offered, as well as those subject tests. In 12th grade, you may still be even trying these tests in early September, October. There's an August SAT now that was first given last year. These are all great chances for seniors to get one last test score in. And even if you're submitting your applications, you can often put a note about subsequent test score going to be sent soon. And, in many cases, you can still be trying for that last test even during application time. This is a typical timeline. Everyone's path is going to be a little bit different. If we look at the actual upcoming test dates for this school year, you want to start to map out what makes sense for you. The first test date for the SAT will be actually in 2 weeks, the August 25th test. Then there's an early October test, November, December test, and then you've got 3 spring tests, March, May, and June. On the ACT, you also have about 7 administrations of the test throughout the year. There's an early September test, late October, a December test, And then in the spring, you've got February, April, June, and a brand new July test that was administered for the first time this summer, just a couple of weeks ago. I do want to make a note that currently the February and July ACTs are not offered in New York State. Now, many of you may be joining us from other states in which it is offered. Congratulations, you have a couple more test dates. Some New York students I do know travel to Connecticut and New Jersey to take the February or July tests. But if you don't plan on doing that, just keep that in mind that those are 2 less test dates for you on the ACT, which may make you lean, if you're thinking about the ACT, towards taking it at least one time in the fall to get one under your belt. Now, in this next column, you see something called QAS and TIR. I just want to make a note about what these are because it's pretty important. When you take these exams, you generally, in about 2 to 3 weeks, will get your score report with the score breakdown. What you don't get, unfortunately, is the test back. So you never get to see the actual questions you got wrong. It would be like in school if the teacher said, well, you got a 91 on the midterm. That's all I'm going to tell you. Good luck on the final. It's pretty frustrating because it would be nice to be able to see, well, what did I actually get wrong? Fortunately, the SAT and the ACT do offer this a few times out of the year on specific test dates. The SAT calls this service QAS, or question and answer service. The ACT calls this TIR, test information release. They're both the same service, just more letters for you to memorize. In the SAT, these are offered in October, March, and May, and the ACT offers their service in December, April, and June. So these are kind of special dates. If these line up for your calendar and this makes sense for you, these are obviously great test dates, because then you're going to get the whole test back, and now you can study specifically on your own or with a tutor or a teacher the exact questions you got wrong. Now you're being really efficient with your test prep. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the ultimate deciding factor. You can do that with a practice test pretty much any time, but it's nice to see the real thing. All right, I just want to take about 2 seconds to talk about the PSAT and really the SAT score report. If you've taken a PSAT already, this could be a great jumping off point. The PSAT and the SAT score report looks like this. Just remember, the PSAT is a little bit of a shortened version of the SAT, so you can only max get a 1520. You can't quite get a 1600. However, the score that they give you is a pretty good indication of what you would get on the real SAT if you took it next tomorrow. It breaks down into verbal versus math, your reading and writing on the left, and your math on the right side. It starts to give you a heat map of where you're at in this sort of general college readiness barometer. But the next page starts to break it down even further into this individual sections: writing and language, reading and math, as well as these subscores, which can give you a better indication of what areas within those sections you need to work on. These subscore titles still themselves are a little generic. We've created this subscore concept chart that's within our web program that'll help you break down those even further into specific question types. And this can help you to get started right away. I need to work on heart of algebra. Oh, these are the questions I need to work on: exponents, combinations, absolute value. You can jump right in and start working on those. All right, a couple notes about preparation. And before we jump into here, I'm also curious, and I'm going to throw up another poll real quick, about what year is your student, or are you in? So I'm going to put this up for a moment, and just curious what our distribution is here in terms of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Maybe you're not even in high school yet. That could be other. Just curious to see what sort of year we're dealing with. Okay. So it looks like we're mostly juniors, which makes sense, and a few sophomores as well. Good. As a sophomore, you definitely want to start thinking about these tests. The summer going into your junior year can be a really great time, at least to get the ball rolling. With some students who have a very busy anticipated junior year, they even take the summer and use it as a quiet time to focus just on SAT or ACT, which isn't a bad idea. But just getting information and understanding what you can expect on this test is not a bad idea to start then. Okay. How to prepare. A lot of this preparation is about one, knowing what you're going to see on the test, and repetition. The only difference between a good tutor and a student isn't that the tutor has an extra brain hiding out somewhere that they can use on the test. It's simply a matter of exposure to the content on the test. And whereas a tutor has a couple of years to do that, a student needs to do it in a shorter time frame. So you want to see a bunch of questions as much as you can. Basically, you want to get an idea of how the same concept might show up in different ways. So it might look slightly different, but you've seen it before in another version. That's really facilitated by getting through a lot of questions, looking at each section of the tests, practicing concepts, um, seeing shortcuts, understanding certain strategies that can really help you ace questions, however they might be presented. I want to talk a moment about our web program, which is a great resource and tool, and also talk a little bit about some other resources that are available. Our web program is an online self-paced program. And in fact, I'm actually going to demo for a moment what it looks like. But just to show you a couple of things that are in it, it's a full course for the SAT and the ACT. This is covering every concept and strategy you're going to see on the SAT or the ACT. We've organized it in a very simple checklist, so you can just start at week 1 and work your way through. There's lessons, there's video explanations, there's quizzes, there's even 2 full-length timed practice exams for each, the SAT and the ACT. It's self-paced. You can use it at your own pace, do it as quickly or as slowly as you'd like, and you can use it anywhere you have internet, a tablet, smartphone, or laptop. It's also individualized. It's collecting all your data and your scores to reveal to you what concepts you actually need to focus on more and what areas you're pretty strong in. So I just want to show this really quick. Um, on our website. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this fairly well. When a student logs into our program, it's very straightforward. They can choose between SAT and ACT, and they jump right into a series of tasks. So although I'm demonstrating a little bit about our program, this general concept really applies to a student's prep. They need to understand a basic concept, a lesson, an idea, and then they need to test themselves on that idea 5, 10 different ways, right? Or more. Let me show you an example. So in week 1, it gives you some warm-up tasks. In week 2, it even gives you a short eval. So if you haven't taken a practice test yet, you can at least get a sense of, where are my scores? What am I starting out with? It gives you about an equivalent of what you would get on the real test. In week 3 here, I'm going to go to math task 12. And each week presents a little bit of math, English, reading, science. You can jump around if you want and focus on certain areas that you want to. There's a short lesson that's presented. You do need to know the fundamentals. You can't just jump right into strategies or questions really without knowing what's the basic understanding of the English concept or the math concept. Here we've got an audio version, so you can just put in your headphones and listen to this lesson. Nothing takes more than 2-3 minutes, and it goes through really concrete examples of the types of questions you're going to see and how the concept's presented. Once you've done that, you can take a quiz. Now it's giving you 5, 10 questions to test. Did you understand that concept? Do you know how to apply that lesson in a real problem? You answer the question, you submit it. If you get it wrong, it'll tell you immediately what the correct answer is. But more importantly, just underneath, it's going to give you a written explanation and a video explanation. This is a step-by-step presentation that's taking you through exactly how to do this problem, not just a general concept of, averages or um, linear equations. It's telling you how to do this specific problem, which mimics a problem exactly on the test and shows up a number of times. So it's like almost having a tutor built in to the computer. And then you go through each question. When you finish, you get a green check mark on that task, and then you move on to the next one. It's also collecting all your results. So eventually you could look at scores by concept and you could pick out what you're good at. If it's red, you probably have a little more work to do. If it's green, you may know this concept fairly well. You could pick out a certain concept, circles for instance. You could go right to lessons and quizzes. You can find it either on the checklist or here it's organized just by concept. Again, I go to circles, I get a little lesson, understand what the types of concepts and ideas they're testing on circles, and then I start a quiz to see if I understand it. There's always a timer going, so you can start to practice getting your pacing down, which is really critical. In addition here, you've got 2 full-length exams that we've created. So if you're a student who's done a lot of prep already and you've worked through the whole prep book, here's new exams you've never seen and new questions you've never seen. In addition, we have a resource materials page. This is great for study, but also for parents. We have study guides here for students. What are the 14, 15 most important concepts on the SAT math you need to focus on? And this can be a quick reference and review guide or cram packet. And for parents, there's a lot of presentations here. How to succeed on the test, how to prepare and start thinking about the exams. There's videos on a smart timeline for juniors, the 5 most common mistakes, general college readiness. And there's user guides on the whole program so you can know how to navigate if you ever need to. Okay. Now, there's a lot more to explore in the program. There's over 4,000 questions. We had hundreds of thousands of students working on it last year, so we're collecting a lot of that data on how much they can improve. It's a really robust program. It's something, again, that you can use anywhere you have internet. On your phone or mobile device, it's optimized for mobile too, so it kind of looks like an app. And that's something that students find very useful and helpful. It eliminates another excuse for them to not prep. If they're on a road trip or on a bus ride, you can still get some work done. Okay. So you look through some of the aspects of the program, detailed lessons, the feedback, the video explanations, a quick view of your data, what concepts you're doing well in or not so well in, help videos on every topic. And these study guides are great. If nothing else, go in and download these, and it's giving you a great primer on strategies and concepts to expect on each section of each test. Based on the data we've collected over the last few years in the program, students who complete the full checklist, they start at week 1 and work through week 18 and finish the full length. They start with that diagnostic, compare it to the full length, and students have shown an increase of about 150 points on the SAT and about 4 points on the ACT. That's not a bad baseline for just self-study. Any work with a tutor or a class above and beyond that can only help to improve those scores. I want to make a note about a couple of common questions that come up in terms of preparing for these exams. Which tests to take? How many tests should I take? Should I take both? After you've taken at least a glimpse at either test, then you may be ready to at least jump in and start preparing. Because these tests are very similar, you're always really preparing for both. And if you switch over to another test, you're not starting from scratch. You're really building on similar concepts and ideas. However, I would generally recommend that you try and prepare for one test at a time. So let's say you're focusing on that October ACT, just focus on ACT for now. If you decide to take the SAT later, you're just going to slightly switch gears, get used to a new format, but you're going to be repeating a lot of similar concepts and strategies. Some students focus on one test first, they do a little bit better, they improve, and they end up never going over to the other test. Maybe the ACT tends to be their test and they do well there. And they never need to actually look at the SAT, they get the score that they need. Other times, students may, they want to put their best foot forward with either test, they'll try both, but eventually they'll start to kind of narrow it down and say, I tried an SAT, I tried an ACT, the SAT is more for me, I did a little bit better there, I'm going to try that once or twice more. There's another reason why you want to take the test a few times. Many schools, even the more selective ones, will do what's called super scoring. Super scoring means they're going to take multiple test dates and combine your best sections. So if you took the test in October, December, and June, they'll take your best English, your best math, your best reading, and combine those together. Now you have to look at the individual program or school to know if they do that, but many schools do. So it's in your best interest to take it a few times and to send all those scores in. Most colleges will only require that you send in the scores you want. However, some schools, usually the more selective schools, may require that you send in all your test scores. So just be aware of that. Okay. I do want to highlight a few other things that you can, other services and resources to take advantage of. Um, many companies offer a variety of services. I think we do a good job of offering a variety of different options for you to find what fits best. Many students like to start with a class. A class will give you a great foundation on all the concepts and strategies that you'll see on the test, and you get it in a short amount of time. You're usually meeting like twice a week for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So you're getting like 18, 20 hours of prep in the course of a month and a half. So it's a kind of an intensive study. It's a good value. And we offer classes, obviously, in the New York area where we're primarily based, but we offer online classes to students all over the country. You can go on our website and find out more about those online classes. They're recorded, so you can watch them later on. They're taught by the same tutors we have here at our centers. Um, we find that there's some advantages to the online class. Sometimes students are a little bit more shy and they don't want to participate live, but when they're home and they're just working on their computer, they're chatting in their questions and answers more readily. It's less apt to have a class where you have someone disruptive in the class. Everyone's sort of in their own home, just accessing through the computer. You can put up questions like we're doing now with these polls. You can share this, the tutor will write answers and problems and can diagram and detail certain concepts. So we have full courses for the SAT and ACT. We also have a lot of recorded, pre-recorded lessons and on-demand classes you can watch at any time. The week leading up to the exams, we usually do a power review course for each section of the test on each night. So like Monday we'll be reading, Tuesday writing and language, Thursday math. And this is a way for you to focus maybe on just one section or do a high level review before the actual exam. Tutoring is a great option as well. We offer tutoring in person and online. What tutoring offers you is obviously a little more personalized or individualized approach. If you've taken a class, you can now build off those concepts and strategies and focus more specifically on the questions you're getting wrong on your test, practice tests, or homework. In addition, you may find that the flexibility of having, you create the schedule and working with your tutor might mean that you're going to start with individual, personalized, private tutoring right off the bat. We also do group tutoring. Many places do this as well, where you have 2 or 3 students working at one time if you're all working towards the same test, maybe a sibling or a teammate or a classmate. And as I mentioned, we also do subject tutoring. That can be an area that, a little bit of help and guidance from a tutor can really boost your confidence and ability in these subject areas in class. We work with a number of schools across the country. Your school may already have access to our web program. They may subscribe to our program directly through the school, in which case your student will have access to our program already. If not, any student can purchase a year subscription for the program right here on our website. And it's really adaptable, as I've shown you through the demo earlier. So that's just a little bit about us, about the web program, about some of the resources available. On our website, you can actually get a bunch of free resources. There's recordings of past webinars. There's some videos to watch on different aspects of the tests. In addition, we have a great blog. This is new content pretty much every week. And there's some really good articles here just on basic ideas about the test, but more even on college preparation and thinking about the college application process. I have our tutoring team actually read this consistently because there's really valuable insights here, even down to how to answer this specific question on the ACT. So I would take some time to check this out. You can also sign up for our newsletter and you'll get this in your inbox. We won't bombard you with too much, just a little friendly reminder, a blog post of what's going on, and some information that can be really helpful. All right, well, I do want to thank you very much for taking the time to join me this evening. At the end of the webinar, a little survey will pop up. We'll also send you a follow-up email with the link for the recording, as well as the files that we shared. And so you can look at those on your own time and look at those in more detail. I just want to reiterate that a couple of key things here. Preparation for these tests is like preparation for anything else. The more time you spend, the more you get ahead of the game, the more you get familiar with what's on these tests, the better you're going to be. They're predictable. We can predict them because we study them all day, and that's the goal of the student. You want to know, hey, I can start to anticipate what I'm going to see on this test, and that's going to mean more success and higher scores. There's a variety of different options out there to use, from self-study to tutoring to classes, or a combination of those three. Make sure you're sitting and talking with someone, a guidance counselor, a teacher. We do free consults all the time over the phone, 20, 30 minutes. We'll talk about any past test scores you have, maybe ask a few questions about your academic background, answer any questions about the exams you have, and maybe help you set up a good test prep plan for the upcoming year. Again, my name is Oliver Luisi. I'm the director of tutoring here. I'm going to put my contact information up on the last slide. This will likely also be sent out in the follow-up email. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out anytime. I'm available, always looking forward to helping students and families, teachers and schools as well. So feel free to give us a call, shoot me an email. Happy to follow up with anything from this webinar or provide any additional information, answer any questions you may have. All right, thanks again for your time this evening. I hope this was informative and helpful. Again, you'll get a video of this so you can watch it at your own pace later on. Share it with your students, share it with anyone that might be interested, and download the files as well so you can find a little bit more about some of the services we offer, as well as getting the PowerPoint for the presentation this evening. All right, thank you guys so much. Have a good evening and good luck with all the test prep.